Have you thought of using like different types of technology to maybe further reduce this water usage on your farms?
So we started with flood irrigation. We moved to sprinklers from a pump system that was not very efficient. And then we've moved to drip irrigation. And I've also tested and have installed on one of my orchards something called subsurface drip, which is the brand is deep root irrigation. That is probably the biggest water savings out there because when you look at water use in a farm, you generally try and feed your crops the equivalent of ET, which is evapotranspiration. And it's a combination of the evaporation and the beneficial use inside the plant of the water, the
Yeah.
transpiration. So if you eliminate the E, all you're doing is feeding the T. And that's a third or less of the water, especially with young trees. You waste a lot of water distributing it around the tree, but it's only using a little bit in the middle,
Mm.
right? The rest of it evaporates. So, in addition to which, there's a little known benefit. We have a lot of salt in our water because we're at the tail end of a river that accumulates salt the entire path down to us. So, the water in Grand Junction, Colorado has total dissolved solids on the order of like 50 to 100 TDS, parts per million.
Mm.
That's almost pristine clean. By the time it gets to the bottom of the river at the border, TDS is closer to 800 parts per million. So that's because guess what? When Vegas pulls water out and runs it through the municipal system and then it gets to the sewer system, where does the sewer water go? It goes back to the river. And what is the one thing that humans do when we urinate? We get rid of our extra salt. So we eat salt and we push salt out of our system as well. Intake, outtake, pretty simple math. So the sewer water that ends up back in the river through millions of users ends up making the river saltier. In addition to which, there are some creeks that flow into the Colorado. There's one in New Mexico and one in Utah that are almost saline. They're just like pure salt. And it's because whatever that source of water is just a really salty bit of soil in the wherever that is in the mountains. No reason for it other than that's just what you get, right? The result of that is that some people say we're not farmers, we're actually salt managers. So
Yeah.
everything we do is managing salt accumulation. So when you think about farming alfalfa, we use 5 to 6 acre feet of water. So my olives use 1.5 acre feet to 2 acre feet max for the big varieties that I want plump. So if I can find a water, and that's so every acre of foot of water that I deliver to my trees has 1 ton of salt on it in it. 1 ton,
Well,
2,000 pounds of salt in that acre foot of water. Now, that acre foot is like 350,000 gallons, though, right? It's a lot of water. It's 1 acre, 1 foot deep. That's an acre foot. You need 5 of those to grow alfalfa. So 5 feet of water to get the alfalfa that we would use. And we literally irrigate every 2 weeks for 50 weeks a year. It grows and we cut it and it grows and we cut it. And in doing so, it's got nitrogen fixing nodules in the root system and it improves the soil quality so that when you take the alfalfa out in year 5, you have much better soil than when you started. So farmers are the most aware of their soil quality because that is the lifeblood, right?
yeah.
And farmers aware of soil quality in the Imperial Valley are always checking their salt levels
Mhm.
because they have to leach a certain amount of salt out. That leached salt water ends up in our sink, the saltwater sink, which is also known as the Salton Sea.
Mhm.
So the Salton Sea only exists because of an accident. However, and that accident was the overflow of the ditches in 1905 or '06, way before my time. I'm not that old. And the result of that is that the Salton Sea was essentially freshwater in 1908. By 1958, it was as saline as the ocean, almost matching. And someone had put in nursery fish in the 40s that were, as it got saltier, they were happier, no predators. It was the best sports fishing in the United States, from what I gather. My dad graduated from high school in 1955. There were more visitors to the Salton Sea in 1955 than there were to Yosemite, the #1 tourist site now in California.
Wow.
All the national parks. Yosemite has the most tourists. There were more that visited the Salton Sea in 1955. Now, granted, that was 70 years ago almost,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
68 years ago. So what happened since then? Well, the salinity's doubled, right? It's a curve. As it evaporates, as you add more saline water and the water evaporates, you get more and more saline behind.
Mhm.
Um, so we manage salt. One of the benefits of the deep root irrigation is that if we only put on 10% as much water, we only put on 10% as much salt. We don't need as much leaching either. That's a really long answer, but I think it's useful to understand. It's
Yeah.
an unusual place to farm because we have more salt problems than almost anywhere else in the US, if not the world. We've gotten really good at it. It, and if we weren't good at it, you wouldn't have any salad to eat from Thanksgiving to Easter. There are no vegetables in the marketplace, basically, except for potatoes.
So not only is your main goal conserving water, but also to reduce the amount of salt that you're outputting into different
Yep.
bodies of water.
We reduce the salt and we do it while still keeping our production up and making food.
Mhm.
So to me, that's the biggest challenge is how can we continue to deliver food while not having salt accumulate in our soil so that we eliminate the ability to deliver food next year, right? So
Yeah.
we actually have to focus on having, and the only way that we figured out how to do that is to leach, which means we put an extra amount of water on that pushes the salt through the soil profile, and it enters these embedded drains that we've put about every 100 feet, 4 feet deep. And those drains take the salt water and take it to the Salton Sea.
So based on these different advancements that you mentioned, such as drip irrigation and going into things like precision agriculture, how do you see more technologies like drones or different sensors being used to help farmers?
So to me, drones have a place in helping us do things better and at a lower cost. It's always driven by the economics. So where can drones save us money? Well, one example is if you could use a drone to do crop dusting, right? Where you put chemical spray in and you can go out and spray for insects. The benefit of the drone is that you don't risk the life of a pilot. You can use battery power, which is way cheaper than petroleum products. And it needs one person instead of three. Usually you have a flag man, a truck man, and a pilot.
Mhm.
The job of the pilot is to just keep going. I'm a pilot myself. So you just go around and around and around and around. And you hopefully don't hit any wires and kill yourself. Right. But it's one of the most dangerous professions in the United States, if not the world, is crop dusting.
Mhm.
So it's very, very common for crop dusters to not live a long life, unfortunately. So the drone technology can replace that. It can also, one of the problems with satellites is they don't have the granularity of the imaging that you can get. So if you can do a heat map where you're looking at oh gosh, there's a term for the image. It's a high resolution image basically, that is giving you both um, the infrared and the ultraviolet.
Hmm.
And by looking at the full bandwidth of the image, you can see where the sick plants are. You can see where the low production is. If you're doing it on a regular basis, as a tree guy, it's nice to know, hey, there's a tree that's in distress. Go out and take a look at it. It may have a clogged emitter. It may have a bad sprayer.
Hmm.
It may have a root fungus. Ooh, well, now you can treat it, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that it could be, but you may not notice it until it's almost dead, because
Mm.
olives are so durable, they kind of reach this tipping point and then they just go and crash. And I have, 45,000 trees. I probably lose 5 trees every year for no apparent reason.
Uh-huh.
Not a big deal because I have 200 trees to the acre. So, okay, so over 40 years, I'll lose 1 acre of trees. It's okay. But what if I lose more? And what if this could prevent me from losing those trees? But at the same time, because it's a small cost, it can't be it can't be a large repair bill, right? It's so you're always fighting that battle. Like, is it worth it to spend the money on a drone if I'm only going to get, I may save 2 trees a year. Well, if I transplant a new tree into that spot, it's $400 for 2 trees, $200 a tree. Okay. So how much does the drone cost? Well, it's only 5 grand. I was like, that doesn't pencil. I'd rather just wait for the tree to die and put a new one in, right? So, but if it's $100 an acre and you kind of zoom, 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 and the guy's going around and hey, it's less work actually. That's one thing that I also see automating that so that, and this is one of the cases for artificial intelligence that's non-threatening, I think. And that is that the AI can be looking at that's what I was remembering, multispectral imaging. So they could be looking at high resolution multispectral imaging on a daily basis and tell me where the problems are,
Yeah.
so that I'm not looking at the image until it gets flagged. And we're not wasting human capital looking at the image either. And that makes it that much easier to manage. I
Well,
also see I also see an opportunity for, one of the biggest problems we have is we're rural, right? So we don't have the ability to have, a 1 minute police response or something. I mean, I hate to say it, this isn't very politically correct, but and I'm 10 miles from a city in one direction and I'm 50 miles from a city in the other direction. But I'm right off a highway where my trees are. And I had a homeless person walking through my orchard trying to get to where my farm operations are. And we leave tools sitting out. We've got a lot of equipment sitting around. Even if the guy is just a vagrant and he lights a little fire to keep himself warm and he leaves it burning and he burns my building down. I mean, what am I going to do about that? Right. So I asked him to leave. He didn't want to because he was high on something. And the sheriffs came and took care of it. But it took a while. Be nice to have, AI monitoring images around the ranch where we put some cameras up and say, oh, there's somebody that just walked through your field in the bottom corner. The closer you are to urban areas, the more you need that. The higher the value of your crop, the more you need that. I remember when I was a kid, my dad had a watermelon crop that ended up being incredibly valuable. And I remember him. I came home from school and I saw my dad rummaging around in his hunting closet. And I said, "What are you doing, Dad?" He's like, "I'm getting your shotgun." And I was like, well, "Why?" I'm like, what happened?" He's like, "I'm giving it to my irrigator so that they can post up on all 4 corners of the watermelon to keep people away so that they don't steal it from me overnight."
mhm.
It's like, I've got $1 million in watermelon sitting in that field right now. and it can develop legs in a hurry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for technology there, for safety, for security, um, for improved agronomic results, a lot of those things.